Unashamed happiness. Does cheekiness, which recalls the rights to happiness, still have a chance? Is the cynical impulse really dead, and is it only cynicism that has a grand, deadly future? Can enlightenment, the idea that it would be reasonable to be happy, be reincarnated in our gloomy modernity? Are we defeated once and for all, and will the cynical twilight of harsh reality and moral dream never again grow lighter? These questions touch on the feeling toward life in the atomically armed civilizations. These civilizations are going through a crisis of their innermost vitality that is probably without historical parallel. The tip of this uneasiness can perhaps be felt most keenly in Germany, a country that has lost 2 world wars and in which the atmospheric conditions register most sensitively how it feels to live between catastrophes. Modernity is losing, in addition to its feeling of vitality, the distinction between crisis and stability. No longer do any positive experiences of our situation take place. No feeling that existence can extend into an immeasurably wide and firm horizon without exhausting itself. A feeling of the provisional, the speculative, at best medium term, lies at the bottom of all public and private strategies. Even those who are optimists by constitution are beginning to quote Luther, who said he would plant an apple tree today anyway, even if he knew that tomorrow the world would come to an end. Periods of chronic crisis demand of the human will to live that it accept permanent uncertainty as the unchangeable background of its striving for happiness. Then the hour of cynicism arrives. It is the life philosophy of crisis. Only under its sign is happiness and uncertainty possible. It teaches moderation of expectations, adaptability, presence of mind, and attention to what the moment offers. It knows that the expectation of long-term careers and the defence of social assets must entangle one in an existence as care, Sorge. It was no accident that Heidegger, in the days of the precarious Weimar Republic, revealed the structure of cares in existence, from Sein und Zeit, 1927. Care absorbs the motif of happiness. Those who want to hold on to the latter must learn, following the cynical model, to break the hegemonic power of cares. But socialized consciousness sees itself at the mercy of an incessant agitation by themes of care. These themes create the subjective lighting of the crisis in which even a well-to-do have already acquired the mentality of the shipwrecked. Never were such well-heeled people so much in the mood of termination. This widespread disturbance of vitality and this bleakening of the life feeling provide the general background to the demoralization of enlightenment. Care clouds existence so persistently that the idea of happiness cannot be made socially plausible anymore. The atmospheric presupposition for enlightenment, cheering up, is not present. Those who, like Ernst Bloch, spoke of the principle of hope would have to be able to find this climatic a priori of enlightenment, the view of a clear sky, at least in themselves. And the Bloch found it makes him different from the mainstream of intellectuals. Even when everything became gloomy, he knew the private secret of cheering up, trusting in life, letting expression flow, believing in development. It was his power to rediscover the current of warmth which he carried in himself everywhere in human history. That makes his view of things more optimistic than they deserve. The current of warmth is what separates him so much from the zeitgeist. the intelligentsia is exposed to the cold currents of universal demoralization, almost without protection. Indeed, it can almost seem as if, as far as defeatism and disorientation are concerned, it is still out in front. Now, no one can be talked into believing in the spirit of utopia, or a principle of hope, who can discover no experiences in himself that gives these expressions meaning. But it can be asked for which existential disposition utopia and hope stand. Is it a dissatisfaction in principle, as some say? Is the Blockian hope, as is claimed, a creation of resentment? I believe if it is taken that way, the report from the current of warmth was not listened to carefully enough. Its message is not the principle of denial. Principled hope stands for biophilia, quoting from. It is a code word for creative friendliness towards life. With it, that which lives follows an unquestioned permission to be and to become. That establishes its opposition to the predominant mentality of care and self-inhibition. Selbsthemmung. Self-inhibition is the symptom that perhaps best characterizes the rest of the critical intelligentsia in the tired column of enlightenment. It knows it is in a two-front situation. On the one side, as it is at pains to resist the cynicism of late capitalism, which has coagulated into a system. On the other side, it is anxious about the radicalness of the immigrants and escapists who seek other ways and to break off cooperation. In such an in-between position, the temptation to defend its identity through forced moralism is great. But with moralism, one surrenders oneself more than ever to the over-serious and depressive mood. The scenery of the critical intelligentsia is therefore populated by aggressive and depressive moralists, problematists, problemaholics, and soft rigorists whose predominant existential stimulus is no. From this group there is not much hope for the correction of the vitality false course. From Walter Benjamin comes the aphorism, "To be happy means to be able to look into oneself without becoming frightened." And where does our readiness to be frightened come from? Fright is, I think, the shadow of moralism and of denial, which together cripple the capacity for happiness. Where moralism is, fright necessarily dominates, as the spirit of self-denial, and fright excludes happiness. Morality always knows, with its 1001 fixed ideas, how we and the world are supposed to be, but are not. From moralism, even a leftist moralism, in the long run, unrealistic and cramped effects emanate. Perhaps an age-old tradition of Christian joylessness again makes itself felt in the Enlightenment, a tradition whose perception of things is attracted by whatever can be taken as proof of the negativity of existence. There is so much of that the material will not be exhausted for the whole of the moralist's life. The front between moralism and amoralism are thus curiously inverted. The former, through its good intentions, encourages the climate of negativity. The latter, although it acts so foolishly or sinisterly, elevates morale considerably. And this amoral good humour is what must attract us as enlighteners into the pre-Christian, the cynical terrain. We have gone so far that happiness seems politically indecent to us. A short time ago, Fritz J. Radatz gave his enthusiastic commentary on Günther Kuhnert's morbid Abtötungsverfahren, Procedures for Killing, 1980. The title, Happiness, the Ultimate Crime? Or perhaps better, Happiness, the Ultimate Impudence. Herein lies the cardinal point of all principled cheekiness. Those who still want to claim to be enlighteners must be able to be so cheeky, so impudent, It is no longer so much our heads on which enlightenment has to perform its labour, as it is the gloomy egoisms, the frozen identities. It may be telling for the demoralised state of critical intelligence that for the entire spectrum of biophilia and self-affirmation, it knows scarcely any word other than narcissism. If this concept already in itself is a dubious construction, in the hands of conservatives it becomes a cudgel for a psychologizing counter-enlightenment with which social tendencies towards critical self-reflection are supposed to be quelled. Just as the phenomenon of narcissism as sickness and unconscious tic is interesting and unwelcome, it is equally suspect as a healthy condition. As a general sickness, it functions like a psychological dynamo for society, which requires people who are full of self-doubt, affirmation-seeking, ambitious, greedy for consumption, selfish and moralistically zealous in their intent on being better than others. As a healthy condition, narcissistic self-affirmation would laugh in the face of the impudent demands of such morose societies. Grey is the basic colour of an age that for a long time has again been dreaming secretly about the colourful Big Bang. What necessitates and inspires such dreams is a sum of vital incapacities. The well-behaved socio-psychological enlightenment thought the problem lay in the incapacity to mourn. But this is not the sole factor. It is even more the incapacity to have the right rage at the right time, the incapacity to express, the incapacity to explode a climate of care, the incapacity to celebrate, the incapacity to let go. Among all these atrophies, one capacity has remained that unerringly sets its sights on what a life grants to itself in the end. A life that no longer sees a way out of such relations. The capacity, under respectable pretences, to work towards circumstances in which, unavoidably, everything will be blown to smithereens with the greatest possible spectacle, without anyone feeling to blame. The catastrophe warms people up, and in it the barren ego comes to its last feast that melts long-lost passions and impulses together in the final burn-up. A short time ago, the leader of the English punk group The Stranglers celebrated the neutron bomb in a frivolous interview because it is what can set a nuclear war into motion. Miss Neutron, I love you. Here he had found the point where the cynicism of protesters coincides with the brazen-faced master cynicism of the strategists. What did he want to say? Look how wicked I can be? His smile was coquettish, nauseated and ironically egoistic. He could not look the reporter in the face. As in a dream, he spoke past the camera for those who will understand him. The little, beautifully wicked punk devil who causes the world to rattle with unthinkable words. That is the language of a consciousness that earlier perhaps did not mean to be so wicked. But now, since the show demands it, not only is it unhappy, it also wants to be unhappy. In this way, misery can be outdone. The last act of freedom is used to will what is terrifying. In this act is a grand gesture, a pathos of ugliness, desperate cheekiness that gives off a spark of independence. In the last instance, they can pretend to be innocent, and the war, the great big shitty mess, is caused by others anyway. They, the beautiful self-mutilators, know enough to scream out against the conspiracy of silence of the respectable. Everything is shit. Miss Neutron, I love you. There is still something of one's own in willed self-destruction, a symbolic shock. That is what can be enjoyed in them. In intellectual trash, in the cynical show, in the hysterical uprising, and in the crazy parade, the suffocating armour around the well-behaved wild ego loosens up. Rocky Horror Picture Show. The hot, cold, hissing death drive of the hunger for oneself.